Hey, how you doing, everyone? Vaughn Gathings here, and I'm going to do a quick chapter review on franchise golden arches. If you've been following what I've been doing chapter reviews for the book Franchise Golden Arches in Black America. It's talking about fast food in Black America. So this is part two of chapter two that I'm doing right now. And this one is looking at the concept of black capitalism. I'm not going to go really deep into it, but I'm just going to highlight some of the main points of the chapter. So the 70s were this period where civil rights was kind of going by the wayside. I mean, the civil rights movement was starting to become an afterthought. It was more so about Black power and Black America wanted economic independence. So this talk of civil rights start coming up. You start hearing it more and more and more as the 70s approach. So as you know, Dr. King, he was assassinated. Malcolm X, if you watch the documentary that has came on Netflix, he was assassinated. Kennedy was murdered. Lyndon B. Johnson was getting ready to leave office, and Richard Nixon was coming in. So this was the time where Black America started shifting their political and social priorities. So what's this idea of black capitalism? So as you know, black capitalism is a system where people make money by the selling of goods or some type of product. And in capitalism, something or somebody's exploited. So, for example, the biggest form of capitalism in America was slavery. But if you look at capitalism now, you know, it might be some type of economic product that's being sold. Not necessarily economic product, but some type of product that's being sold, and somebody is being exploited. So, for example, you look at Amazon. Jeff Bezos, he's the richest person in the world. What is it? What is the product he's selling? He has e-commerce, and he has a bunch of goods being sold through e-commerce. But to get this done, of course, you have Amazons all over the country. You have the corporate office making sure that these Amazons are supported. And you have a bunch of people who are working their tails off. As you know, Amazon has a lot of labor issues. So that's an example of capitalism. So in the 70s, this idea of black capitalism, which wasn't a new idea, started to come in the forefront. And Richard Nixon, who wasn't a big fan of civil rights, he started to think, well, I think blacks can be more independent. They don't have to rely on us giving these grants and these handouts. So how about we allow African Americans to run their own businesses and become owners? So Richard Nixon versus civil rights. So Richard Nixon was not a fan of civil rights. He thought civil rights was a thing of the past. He thought it didn't help African American people, Black American people, however you want to call it. He thought ADOS people, he thought it didn't work for them. And he thought black capitalism was the way. And he thought that anyone could champion black capitalism. And there was a lot of people championing this idea, not just Republicans like Nixon, but Democrats. Jesse Jackson got behind it. A bunch of activists were getting behind this idea of black capitalism. And also, black capitalism was a little more appropriate than Black Power, which was the other concurrent movement going on, where you had the Black Panthers, you had Stokely Carmichael, and all these other activists who took their activism to more of a radical level than what Dr. King and his group and the people he was rolling with were doing. So a lot of people were championing this idea of black capitalism. And they thought, hey, this is what blacks need. They need to have their own businesses. They need to have their own, they need to be owners, entrepreneurs. And in theory, it sounds good. And if I was alive then, I would say, yeah, of course. Even now, to an extent, yeah, absolutely. We need our own businesses, our own collective economics going on in our own communities. But it was a drawback to this idea of black capitalism that Richard Nixon was talking about. So there was this one project called Project Own, which is supposed to be this initiative that helped black entrepreneurs. And we talked a little bit about this last week if you watched the episode. So Project Own was created by this guy named Howard J. Samuels. He was appointed by Lyndon B. Johnson to oversee the Small Business Association and the Small Business Administration. I'm sorry. And he was also a civil rights activist. He was a big advocate of what Dr. King was doing. So he was more so a guy on the left and a guy for racial equality and racial progress. But the problem with Project Own was a lot like those salt and pepper relationships we talked about last week, meaning they were white investors investing in black entrepreneurs or black businesses, but they didn't want to do it. So what Project Own did was it incentivized the white investors. So if they were cutting a check, giving a loan to a black business, they were getting paid for it. They weren't doing it out the generosity of their heart. Didn't really care for it, but they got something from it by doing it from the government. But what was going on, was the problem with black capitalism back in the day, and what was the big drawback of it. What was going on was as these salt and pepper relationships or the federal government is giving money to these white investors who weren't really passionate about black ownership or black economic progress, there were still banks that were denying loans to prospective black entrepreneurs. There were banks who was denying grants and things like that. So there's still this big systemic problem with discrimination going on with banks and lenders, and nothing was being done about it. So it was a big policy issue. And, it's not, when you talk about black capitalism, it's no fault of anyone. It's not a fault of people supporting businesses. It's not a fault of not enough black entrepreneurs. No, we've tried to do this, and we are still trying to do this, and we should commend and support anyone who's trying to do it. But when you don't have the policy to support it, it's an issue, it's a problem. So then the black capitalism bait and switch. So why did I call this episode bait and switch? That's one part, and this is the other part why I called it that. So what was going on was civil rights were bartered for economic opportunity. And what do we mean by that? So for example, if activists were quiet and the community were quiet about racial issues, they would be rewarded with funding and resources. So that's like a catch-22. If I'm quiet about this bank not giving me a loan, or these police officers harassing the people in my community, I get a new high school in my community. Or if these students at this college were quiet about some type of racist practice going on, we get a new law school. Or if we're quiet about busing, about school busing, or we get a new grammar school, or we get a new, I don't know, we get a new after school program. And that's a problem because, you're quieting the people who want to make change and can make change for a resource. And these resources were very modest. The Office of Minority Business Enterprise were one of the people who are giving these fundings out, these bartered funding for bartered exchanges, but they were modest at best. They were like funded heavily, and or these resources stopped getting funded after a while. So basically, the Nixon administration killed it killed the idea of civil rights. It really killed it because now you're in this period where you got all these programs like affirmative action and things of that nature where where blacks were supposed to get some type of will get access to more resources. There's no more economic progress, routes to economic progress. But you look at the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, those were periods where the civil rights movement, it just took this downward spiral. And then we're in the same situation where we're in now. We don't have the net worth. We don't have a lot of entrepreneurs. There are people who can't be entrepreneurs because they don't have access to capital. Or as you saw the article, if you looked at Black enterprises, there are blacks who are denied for business loans. So what was the whole point of this Black capitalism movement? So the debate that started going on was the debate that started going on between activists, these activists who were in support of Black capitalism, and these activists who, weren't so much in support of Black capitalism, i.e., Jesse Jackson was in support of Black capitalism, but the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee wasn't. The problem was, people thought that Black capitalism was good in theory, and the government wasn't holding their end. They were giving out the loans, the grants that can sustain, business in the community. They just relied on us to fund these businesses or pay for products, but we didn't really have the money, and it still didn't solve the deeper issues of racism, of discrimination, of prejudice. It didn't go deep into those issues, and you still had riots going on. You still had these organizations practicing racism or practicing discrimination. So it didn't fix the problem. And to this day, if you are somebody who considers yourself a Black capitalist, or and which is nothing wrong with that, because capitalism has its benefits to it. All those economic, all these economic kind of theories have a benefit towards socialism, capitalism, communism. I don't consider myself any of those. Whatever works, but you can't fix things without. You cannot fix these things without some type of political backing. And that's what was going. That's what the book was talking about. Like, there was not policy that fought the deeper issues. So what good is it starting a business if you can't get a loan, or if you can't get a grant, or you rely on someone who doesn't want to give it to you? An investor who doesn't want to give it to you, you're relying on them. So that's what this second half of the chapter was talking about. And as the rise of Black capitalism, the only thing that was really benefiting, once again, was fast food. The fast food industry started to take a rise, because now you had McDonald's. Now you had places like McDonald's. They had more oversight of these relationships. So, like, share, support. Javon Gathings. I will be back with you all next week. I'm out. Thank you.